"Don't touch me," she cried. The rancher lifted the blanket, and his blood ran cold. The sun was slowly sinking behind the distant hills, casting long shadows over the wide, empty fields of the Montana ranch. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of hay, earth, and the faint smoke from the barn's chimney. Jack, the rancher, had spent the whole day tending to the livestock, repairing fences and checking the water troughs. His boots were dusty, his hands rough from the work, and the ache in his muscles reminded him of how long a day on the ranch could be. But he loved it, the quiet, the freedom, and the simple rhythm of life here. Jack's ranch was large, stretching over hundreds of acres, with rolling hills, a small creek, and a few outbuildings for the animals. His cabin was modest but sturdy, made of weathered wood and stone, with a small porch where he often sat in the mornings to watch the sunrise. Today, however, he didn't have time to relax. There was always something to do on a ranch, and the animals never waited. As he walked past the barn, the cattle mooed softly, their eyes following his every move. He waved at them, feeling a strange comfort in their steady, familiar presence. Meanwhile, Emily, a young woman visiting the ranch for a short stay, was inside the guest cabin. She had arrived a few days ago to help Jack with some of the ranch chores and to experience life far from the city. The quiet had been wonderful at first, a peaceful escape from her busy life. But today, as the shadows grew longer and the wind whispered through the trees, she felt uneasy. The isolation that had seemed so appealing now felt heavy. Every creak of the wooden floorboards, every rustle in the bushes outside made her heart race. Emily had been organizing the small cabin when she heard a soft thump outside the window. She froze, holding her breath. It could have been the dog running around, she told herself. But deep down, a shiver ran down her spine. She tried to focus on something else, but her imagination kept creating shapes and movements in the dark corners of the room. The wind pushed against the windows, rattling them, and the sound seemed louder than it should have. She pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders, trying to calm herself. Outside, Jack finished checking on the last of the horses. Their soft snorts and the occasional stomp of their hooves made the night feel alive. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked toward the guest cabin. Emily's light was still on, a warm glow in the approaching darkness. He felt a small wave of responsibility. She wasn't used to this life, and he had to make sure she was safe. Life on a ranch was beautiful, but it could also be unforgiving. Jack walked slowly toward the cabin, boots crunching on the gravel path. He called out, "Emily, everything okay in there?" His voice carried lightly through the evening air, but there was no answer. Only the sound of the wind and the distant call of a lone owl. He felt a slight unease, but he told himself she was probably just busy or lost in thought. Ranch life had taught him to remain calm and assess situations carefully. Panicking did no one any good. Inside the cabin, Emily was pacing. Her thoughts were scattered, her mind trying to make sense of the strange feeling that had settled over her. She had been to the city, to busy streets and loud cafes, where the world was full of people and noise. Here, the silence was different. It felt alive, almost watching her. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the small lamp on the bedside table. Its warm light cast gentle shadows on the walls, but they seemed to move and stretch unnaturally as the night deepened. Suddenly, a loud thump came from the corner of the room. Emily's heart jumped. She grabbed the blanket on the bed and pulled it over herself, shaking slightly. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself, but the words felt empty. Her mind raced through possibilities, none of them comforting. The ranch was supposed to be safe, but right now nothing felt safe. Jack arrived at the cabin just as Emily's fear seemed to peak. He knocked gently on the door. "Emily, it's me." "Are you all right?" There was still no answer. His brow furrowed. That was unusual. She had always been polite and responsive. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open slowly, his hand hovering near the frame, ready for anything. The cabin was quiet, almost too quiet. Jack's eyes scanned the room. Emily was sitting on the bed, clutching the blanket tightly around her, eyes wide. She didn't speak, only shook her head and pointed toward the far corner of the bed. Jack's stomach tightened. He could feel the tension in the air, a strange, heavy energy he hadn't felt before. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her further. "Emily, what is it?" he asked softly. She swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack froze for a moment, trying to understand what she meant. He looked at the bed, then back at her, confusion and concern written all over his face. Her fear was real, that much he could see, but he didn't know what could have caused it. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows and sending a shiver through the cabin. Jack felt a chill, not just from the air, but from the fear radiating from Emily. He knew he had to be careful. He had faced many unexpected challenges on the ranch, wild animals, harsh weather, and accidents, but something about this was different. This was fear he could not explain, a deep, instinctive fear that made his muscles tense and his heart beat faster. Jack took a slow, steadying breath. He crouched slightly to meet Emily's gaze. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice calm and even. "I just need to see what's wrong so I can help you." She nodded slightly, but didn't move the blanket. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of terror and trust. It was a delicate balance. Jack understood that this moment required patience, understanding, and careful action. He reached slowly toward the blanket, careful not to startle her. Every step, every motion had to be deliberate. Emily's hands trembled as she held it close to herself, as if the blanket were the only thing protecting her from whatever fear had taken hold. The silence in the cabin was intense, filled only with the soft sound of the wind outside and the distant call of an owl. Jack's mind raced with possibilities, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had to act carefully, or he could make the situation worse. As he got closer, Emily's voice rose slightly, more urgent this time. "Please, don't touch it, not yet." Jack paused, respecting her fear. He could feel the tension in the room like a heavy weight pressing down on him. The ranch had taught him patience, but this was a different kind of patience, a test of trust and understanding. He nodded slowly, giving her a reassuring look. "Okay," he said softly. "I'll wait. Just tell me when you're ready." Emily took a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. The fear was still there, but the presence of Jack, steady, calm, and familiar, helped her feel slightly safer. She knew she could trust him, even if she didn't understand why she was so scared. The room seemed to settle a little, the tension easing ever so slightly. But the unease remained, lingering in the shadows and the corners of the cabin. Outside, the last light of the sun disappeared behind the hills. Darkness settled over the ranch, and the wind carried the faint scent of pine and earth. Jack stood patiently, waiting for Emily to feel ready. He knew that whatever was about to be revealed, they would face it together. He had learned long ago that life on the ranch was full of surprises, some beautiful, some harsh, but facing them calmly and carefully was the only way to survive. In the quiet cabin, Emily finally took a deep breath. She nodded slightly at Jack, a silent signal that she was ready. The fear was still there, but the trust she had in him gave her courage. Jack's blood ran cold, but not yet from what he would see. He felt the weight of the unknown, the tension of the moment, and the responsibility he carried to protect her. He knew that once the blanket was lifted, nothing would be the same again. And with that, the ranch waited silently, as if holding its breath, for the moment when the truth would be revealed. Jack stood frozen for a moment, staring at the blanket that Emily clutched tightly to her chest. He could feel her trembling, hear the shallow rhythm of her breathing, and see the fear in her wide eyes. The room felt smaller somehow, though the cabin hadn't changed. The shadows cast by the lamp on the wooden walls seemed to shift unnaturally, stretching like they were reaching out into the corners. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, making the branches scratch against the windows. Every sound seemed louder than it should have been, sharper, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "Emily," Jack said softly, his voice calm and steady. "I'm right here, you're safe. I just need to see what's under the blanket so I can help." He kept his tone gentle, patient, but firm enough to reassure her that he meant no harm. She hesitated, holding the blanket closer, as if it could shield her from something she could not name. Emily swallowed hard, her hands shaking. She had never felt such fear before. The cabin had always seemed like a safe haven, a quiet place where she could enjoy the simple life of the ranch. But tonight was different. She didn't know why, but some deep instinct told her that something was terribly wrong. And yet, Jack's calm presence gave her a fragile sense of security. She nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, a silent signal that he could proceed, but only a little. Jack crouched slowly, moving one hand forward toward the blanket. He paused, letting Emily adjust her grip, giving her the sense that she was still in control. The wind outside seemed to die down for a moment, leaving only the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath their feet. Jack's heart pounded, not from fear but from the tension in the room, the uncertainty of what they were about to face. He had seen many unexpected things on the ranch, but nothing like this. As his fingers touched the edge of the blanket, Emily's voice rose in a small, shaky whisper. "Please, just a little, don't pull it all at once." Jack nodded. "I promise," slowly. He lifted the corner gently, revealing the top of the bed. Emily's eyes stayed fixed on the blanket, unwilling to look, and Jack respected that. The moment felt suspended in time, stretched thin between fear and trust. He could feel his own pulse racing, the quiet hum of tension pressing against his chest. Slowly, inch by inch, he pulled the blanket back. At first there was nothing unusual, just the bed, the linens, and the familiar patterns of the cabin. But then Jack saw it. A small, delicate object partially hidden beneath the folds of the blanket. His brow furrowed as he realized it was something out of place, something that did not belong on a simple guest bed in a quiet ranch cabin. He leaned in slightly, careful not to make sudden movements, and took a closer look. Emily's hand shot out, gripping the blanket again, but Jack held her gaze and whispered, "It's okay. I see it. Don't worry." She nodded, though her hand still shook. Slowly, he uncovered more. What he saw made his stomach tighten, a cold wave of shock running through him. It was real, tangible, and unexpected, something that seemed impossible to exist in this quiet, peaceful place. Jack reached carefully, pulling the blanket just enough to fully reveal the object. It was a small bundle, wrapped hastily, something, or someone clearly in distress. His mind raced, piecing together what he saw. It was human, a child perhaps, or a young teenager. The way they were curled up, shivering and barely able to speak, told Jack that they had been through something frightening. Emily gasped softly, clutching her blanket to her chest. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack turned to her, his own voice calm but urgent. "It's okay. They're alive. We need to get help." His hands moved carefully, making sure not to frighten the child further. The first priority was safety, warmth, and reassurance. The child's eyes opened slightly, filled with confusion and fear. They tried to speak, but the words came out as barely audible whispers. Jack crouched closer, his tone gentle. "It's okay. You're safe now. You're at the ranch. No one will hurt you here." The child's trembling lessened a little, though their body still shook from fear and cold. Emily moved closer, offering a soft smile. "You're okay," she said softly, trying to create a sense of calm. The combination of Jack's calm presence and Emily's soothing voice seemed to work. Slowly, the child began to relax, their small hands clutching the blanket that had protected them. Jack knew the first step was to make sure the child was physically okay. He checked for injuries, looking for bruises, cuts, or signs of illness. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries, just exhaustion, cold, and fear. He signaled Emily to fetch a warm blanket and some water from the kitchen. She moved quickly, returning with both, and Jack wrapped the child gently, offering sips of water. The cabin, once filled with tension and fear, began to feel warmer, not just from the blankets but from the sense of hope. Jack could feel the adrenaline slowly leaving his system, replaced by the practical mindset of someone trained to handle emergencies. He had faced storms, broken fences, and injured animals, but this was different. This required patience, empathy, and careful action. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling the trees and carrying the faint sound of distant wildlife. Jack glanced through the window, making sure there was nothing unusual around the cabin. The ranch was isolated, but that isolation was both a blessing and a risk. Tonight it had brought something unexpected to his doorstep. Emily sat beside the child, speaking softly, telling stories and trying to create a sense of normalcy. Jack watched them, his mind turning over the possibilities. How had the child ended up here? Who had left them? Was this an accident or something more deliberate? Questions swirled in his mind, but for now the focus was clear. The child needed care, warmth, and safety. As the evening turned deeper into night, the cabin's warm light stood like a small beacon in the dark fields of the ranch. Jack stayed close, speaking softly, helping the child adjust. Emily never left their side, her calm presence a soothing contrast to the fear that had filled the room earlier. For the first time since the fear had taken hold, the tension began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. Jack knew that the night was far from over. They would need to call authorities in the morning, explain the situation, and ensure the child's safety. But for now, in the quiet cabin, there was a fragile peace. The child, wrapped in warm blankets, sipping water and reassured by the voices of Jack and Emily, seemed to begin the slow process of recovery from whatever ordeal had brought them here. He glanced at Emily, giving her a small, reassuring nod. "You did well," he said softly. She smiled, tired but relieved. "We did it together," she replied. And in that moment the cabin felt like a place of safety, a small haven in the vast, quiet wilderness. Jack knew that tomorrow would bring questions, investigations, and explanations, but tonight was about care. About presence, about patience, about showing that even in fear, even in uncertainty, kindness and calm could make a difference. The ranch, the fields, the hills, they had always been his life. But tonight, the cabin had become a place of healing and protection, a reminder of the human capacity to help those in need. Outside, the wind continued to move through the trees, carrying the sounds of the night, but inside the cabin there was a stillness, a quiet moment of safety, warmth, and understanding. Jack stayed close, alert but calm, ready for whatever might come next, knowing that fear could be met with patience and terror could be met with care. And as the child finally drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, Jack and Emily sat quietly, watching, waiting, and making sure that the fragile peace they had created would last until morning. In the quiet of the ranch night, a new chapter had begun, one that would test courage, patience, and compassion, but also one that promised hope, safety, and the possibility of healing. The night deepened over the ranch, the darkness outside the cabin pressing against the windows, like a quiet, watchful presence. Inside, the warm glow of the lamp created a small circle of light, holding back the shadows that seemed to creep along the corners of the room. Jack sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the small figure on the bed, wrapped in blankets, trying to make sense of the situation. His mind raced with questions, each one heavier than the last. How had this child come to be here? Who had left them alone in the wilderness? And why? Emily stayed beside the bed, her hand gently resting on the child's arm. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice soft and steady, as if the repetition of the words could drive the fear away. The child's small body trembled slightly, but their breathing had slowed, and their wide eyes began to blink more calmly. Jack noticed the way they clung to the blankets, the way their tiny hands gripped the soft fabric as if it were the only thing keeping them anchored in the world. Jack leaned back slightly, thinking. The ranch had always been quiet, even lonely at times, but it had never felt threatening. The animals were predictable, the land familiar, and the routines of the day comforting. Tonight, though, everything felt different. The child's presence, the fear in Emily's eyes, the shadows dancing on the walls, all of it created a tension that seemed to fill every corner of the cabin. He took a deep breath and spoke gently. "Can you tell me your name?" The child hesitated, looking between Jack and Emily, their small lips trembling as if unsure whether words could be trusted. Finally, in a barely audible whisper, they said, Mia." Jack nodded slowly, committing the name to memory. "Mia," he repeated softly. "It's a beautiful name. You're safe here, Mia. We're going to take care of you." Emily smiled faintly, her eyes softening as she looked at Mia. "That's right," she said. "You don't need to be afraid anymore. We're going to help you." Jack watched the child's expression change subtly, a tiny flicker of trust appearing in the dark, wide eyes. It was fragile, easily broken, but it was a start. He knew that building trust would take time, patience, and care, but it had to begin now. Jack's mind turned over practical concerns. The child needed warmth, food, and comfort, yes, but they also needed answers. How had they ended up here? Were they lost, or had something more dangerous happened? For now, he decided the first priority was simple: safety. Everything else could wait until the morning. He glanced at Emily, and they shared a silent understanding. They had to stay calm, keep Mia reassured, and wait for daylight to make plans. He moved gently to the small kitchen area and prepared some warm water and a few simple snacks: bread, cheese, and apples. The child's small eyes followed every movement, their curiosity mixed with caution. Jack set the plate near the bed, careful not to startle Mia. "Here," he said softly, "eat a little. You need your strength." Emily encouraged her gently, helping Mia pick up small pieces of food and sip warm water. Slowly, the child began to eat, the trembling hands gradually relaxing as they focused on the immediate comfort of warmth and nourishment. Once Mia had eaten a little and seemed calmer, Jack decided it was time to understand more about what had happened. "Can you tell us where you were before you came here?" he asked, keeping his tone gentle. The child hesitated, eyes darting toward the shadows in the room as if fearing they might move. Emily placed a comforting hand on the child's shoulder. "It's okay," she said. "You're safe now. You can tell us anything." Finally, Mia spoke, her voice still weak but steadier than before. I was lost," she whispered. "I didn't know where to go. The road, it ended, and I didn't know how to find anyone." Jack and Emily listened closely, absorbing every word. It painted a picture of a child who had wandered far from safety, caught in the vastness of the Montana wilderness with no one to help them. Jack's heart tightened. He had always known the wilderness could be unforgiving, but hearing it from the child's voice made it real, immediate, and urgent. "You did the right thing by coming here," he said softly. "We're going to make sure you're safe from now on." "No one will hurt you here," Emily nodded, adding, "You're not alone anymore, Mia. We'll help you." As the night wore on, Jack and Emily worked quietly, tending to the small details that made the cabin feel safer. They adjusted blankets, made sure the room was warm, and kept a gentle conversation going to distract Mia from her fear. The child clung to the comfort of their voices, the steady rhythm of reassurance slowly easing the tension that had filled the cabin earlier. Outside, the wind continued to move through the trees, rustling the leaves and carrying the faint sounds of nocturnal animals. It was a reminder of how isolated the ranch truly was, how the night could feel vast and threatening when you were alone. Jack's mind wandered to the possibility that Mia could have been wandering for hours, maybe even days, before finding the cabin. The thought made him tighten his jaw. He had to ensure this never happened again. He decided to check the surrounding area quietly, just to be sure. Jack stepped to the door and opened it slightly, careful not to make a sound that would startle Mia. The ranch lay still under the blanket of darkness, the fences and fields bathed in moonlight. The animals were calm, and there was no sign of danger nearby. He breathed deeply, letting the cool night air fill his lungs, and felt a slight sense of relief. The immediate danger seemed gone, but he knew the night was far from over. Returning to the cabin, he sat quietly, observing Mia as she finally leaned against Emily, her small body exhausted from fear and hunger. Her eyelids fluttered as sleep threatened to pull her under. Jack whispered softly, "Rest now, Mia. We'll be right here. Nothing will harm you while you sleep." Emily echoed his words, her voice a gentle anchor in the darkness. Slowly, Mia's breathing deepened, and the tension in her small body began to ease. Jack allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. He knew that morning would bring questions and decisions. Authorities would need to be contacted, the circumstances of the child's presence investigated, and arrangements made for their care. But for now, the focus was simple: care, comfort, and reassurance. He understood that the night's events could not be undone, but the immediate fear could be eased, replaced by trust and safety. As the hours passed, the quiet of the ranch night enveloped the cabin. Jack and Emily took turns keeping watch, speaking softly and maintaining a calm presence. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the trees, reminded them of the fragility of the moment, the delicate balance between fear and safety. The child slept lightly, occasionally stirring but finding comfort in the steady, watchful care of the two adults. Jack reflected on the day's events. Life on the ranch was usually predictable, guided by routines and the rhythm of nature. But tonight had been different, unexpected, intense, and frightening. He realized that the world could change in an instant, and that patience, empathy, and calmness were sometimes more important than skill or strength. He had learned that fear could paralyze, but understanding could heal. By the early hours of the morning, a quiet calm settled over the cabin. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. Jack watched as the sun slowly rose over the fields, illuminating the ranch in a gentle glow. Mia stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, and Jack felt a small wave of relief. The night had been long and tense, but she had survived it. Emily yawned, stretching her arms as the room brightened. She glanced at Mia and smiled gently. "Morning is here," she whispered. "You're going to be okay now." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the night lifting slightly. The challenges of the day ahead were clear, but the worst of the fear had passed. As the sun continued to rise, Jack knew that the events of the night would leave a lasting impression on all of them. The memory of fear, the experience of helping someone in need, and the fragile trust they had built would stay with them. But for now, there was a sense of hope, a sense of accomplishment, and the quiet knowledge that even in fear, kindness and calm could make a difference. The ranch, once a place of ordinary work and quiet routine, had become the scene of a night that would never be forgotten. A night where trust, patience, and courage had met fear, and where the smallest act of care had changed everything. And as the morning light spread over the fields and hills, Jack, Emily, and Mia faced the new day together, ready for whatever challenges and answers awaited them. Morning light spilled across the wide fields of the ranch, painting the hills in soft shades of gold and green. The sun warmed the earth slowly, and the crisp air smelled faintly of grass, dew, and wood smoke. Inside the cabin, the quiet of the night had given way to the gentle sounds of a new day. Birds chirped outside, and the faint rustle of the trees reminded everyone that life continued, even after the night's fear. Jack sat quietly at the edge of the bed, watching Mia stir under the blankets. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, confusion giving way to awareness. The events of the night still lingered in her mind, and her small hands clutched the blanket instinctively. Jack leaned closer, his voice soft but steady. "Good morning, Mia." "You slept well," she nodded faintly, still trembling slightly, but the warmth of the cabin and the presence of Jack and Emily had given her some comfort. Emily stirred beside the bed, offering a reassuring smile. "You're safe now," she said gently. "No one will hurt you. We're going to take care of you today." Her voice had a calming effect, and Mia blinked a few times, her breathing slowing as the fear from the night began to fade. Jack felt a small sense of relief. The night had been intense and full of uncertainty, but now, in the light of day, they could begin to handle the aftermath carefully and thoughtfully. Jack knew that the first step was to provide practical care. He helped Mia sit up and offered her some warm food, oatmeal, bread, and a little fruit. She ate slowly, still cautious, but with each bite, the tension in her small body seemed to ease. Jack observed quietly, noting how fragile trust could be, and how essential it was to handle it with care. Emily stayed close, speaking softly and keeping the child engaged, ensuring that the atmosphere remained calm and reassuring. Once Mia had eaten, Jack and Emily began discussing the next steps. They knew authorities would need to be informed, both to ensure Mia's safety and to investigate how she had come to be alone in such a remote area. The thought of this made Jack's brow furrow. The wilderness could be unforgiving, and for a child to wander without guidance was dangerous. He wanted to act carefully, balancing immediate care with the need to involve the proper people. Jack decided to make a call. Using the old landline in the cabin, he contacted the local sheriff's office. He explained the situation calmly and clearly, making sure to highlight that the child was safe, unharmed, and now under their care. The dispatcher listened, asking a few questions about the child's condition, the circumstances of the discovery, and the ranch's location. Jack answered everything, giving them the reassurance that Mia was being protected until help arrived. While waiting for instructions, Jack and Emily focused on keeping Mia comfortable. They gave her fresh clothes, a warm bath, and a soft blanket to rest under. Emily read to her from a small book she had brought, using the quiet story to distract her from the fear that still lingered in her mind. Slowly, the child began to smile faintly, responding to the kindness and gentle care surrounding her. Jack watched this carefully, noting that the right mix of patience and reassurance could help heal even the deepest moments of fear. Soon, there was a knock at the door. Jack opened it to find two deputies from the sheriff's office standing politely, nodding in greeting. "Good morning," one said. "We received your call. Is everything okay here?" Jack nodded and gestured inside. "Yes, the child is safe. Please come in." The deputies stepped inside, scanning the cabin respectfully, taking care not to frighten Mia further. One deputy knelt beside the bed, speaking gently to Mia. "Hi there, I'm Officer Harris. We're here to make sure you're safe. Can you tell us your name?" Mia repeated softly. "Mia," and the deputy smiled warmly. "That's a good name. You're safe now. We're going to take care of you too." Jack and Emily observed quietly, giving Mia space to answer while remaining close enough to provide reassurance. After introductions, the deputies asked a few questions about how Mia had been found, the location, and her condition. Jack explained everything as clearly as he could, emphasizing that the child had been alone and frightened, but unharmed, and that she was under their care. The deputies nodded, taking notes and discussing the best way to proceed with temporary care until Mia could be reunited with her family or placed in safe guardianship. Once the deputies left with instructions, Jack and Emily returned to the cabin. Mia had curled back under the blanket, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and a cautious curiosity about what would happen next. Jack knelt beside her, speaking softly. "You did very well, Mia. You stayed calm and you're safe now. Everything is going to be okay." Emily added, "Yes, you were very brave. We're proud of you." Slowly, Mia smiled faintly, a small flicker of trust that grew with each kind word. The morning passed quietly. Jack and Emily worked to make the cabin feel normal again, fixing small details and maintaining a calm atmosphere. They talked gently to Mia, helping her understand that she would not be alone, that she was safe, and that everything would be handled properly. The small routines, preparing food, tidying the cabin, offering comfort, helped the child feel a sense of stability. Jack also took time to reflect on the broader picture. The ranch had always been a place of routine, with its predictable rhythms and quiet solitude. But events like last night reminded him that life was unpredictable and fragile. The wilderness could be beautiful and peaceful, but it could also be dangerous when people, especially children, were left vulnerable. He resolved to be more vigilant, to create even safer boundaries, and to ensure that no one under his care would ever face such fear again. By mid-morning, the deputies returned with instructions for temporary guardianship and arrangements for Mia's care. Jack and Emily accompanied the child to meet them, making sure she felt secure and calm throughout the process. They held her hands gently, speaking reassuring words and emphasizing that she was not alone. The deputies explained the steps that would be taken, including contacting her family and ensuring she was placed in a safe environment. Jack watched as Mia responded positively to the deputy's kind demeanor, her small hands relaxed, her breathing steady. He felt a sense of relief, knowing that the child would be taken care of properly. Emily whispered softly, "You're safe now, Mia. Everything will be okay." The child nodded, a small smile playing on her lips as she looked between the two adults who had protected her through the night. After the deputies left, Jack and Emily returned to the cabin. The atmosphere was quieter now, filled with a reflective calm. They sat together, sipping warm tea and letting the events of the night and morning settle in their minds. Jack spoke first, breaking the silence. "I can't stop thinking about how easily someone could get lost out there, how quickly things can go wrong. We were lucky to be here when she needed us." Emily nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Yes, but we did what we could. We stayed calm and we helped her." "That counts for something," Jack agreed. "It counts for everything." He leaned back, watching the sunlight grow stronger over the fields, casting long shadows and highlighting the quiet beauty of the ranch. The night's terror was behind them, but its lessons remained clear. Life was fragile, trust was precious, and patience could change the course of someone's day or even their life. Emily smiled faintly. "We'll make sure this cabin is always safe," she said. "No child or anyone will ever feel that kind of fear here again." Jack nodded. They shared a quiet moment, the weight of responsibility and the relief of having succeeded in their care mingling in the air. The ranch was more than a place of work now. It was a sanctuary, a place where fear could be met with calm, where courage could grow, and where human kindness could make a difference. As the day continued, Jack returned to the routines of ranch life, feeding animals, checking fences, and maintaining the land. Emily helped where she could, but their minds often drifted back to the events of the night. They discussed ways to improve safety and vigilance, ensuring that no one else would be left alone or frightened. Their bond, strengthened by the shared experience, had grown deeper, founded on trust, courage, and care. Evening came again, slower and more peaceful than the previous night. The wind whispered gently through the trees, the animals settled into the quiet rhythm of the ranch, and the cabin glowed warmly in the fading light. Jack and Emily sat on the porch for a while, reflecting silently on the day. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and responsibility together, and had emerged with the knowledge that patience, empathy, and calm action could change the outcome of even the most frightening situation. And though the night had tested them in ways they could not have imagined, they knew that the ranch, their home, and their actions had made a difference. Life would continue, as it always did, with its challenges and unpredictability. But in that quiet moment, Jack and Emily allowed themselves a sense of peace, knowing that they had protected someone vulnerable and had shown the true power of human kindness. The morning sun rose slowly over the Montana ranch, painting the fields and hills in soft shades of gold and green. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of earth, grass, and pine. Birds chirped and flitted from tree to tree, their songs filling the quiet spaces with gentle life. For Jack and Emily, the world felt both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. The events of the past days lingered in their minds, reminding them of how quickly life could change and how fragile safety could be. Jack stepped out onto the porch, stretching his back and taking in the vastness of the ranch. He could see the animals grazing peacefully, their movements slow and untroubled. The fields were calm, the fences stood strong, and the wind whispered softly through the tall grass. For the first time since discovering Mia, he felt a sense of quiet relief. The danger, the fear, the uncertainty, they were behind them, and yet the memory of it lingered, a reminder of how quickly things could shift. Emily joined him on the porch, carrying a cup of warm tea. She handed it to Jack with a small, tired smile. "It feels peaceful this morning," she said softly, "almost like the world is letting us breathe for the first time in days." Jack nodded, taking a sip and letting the warmth settle in his chest. "Yes," he said, "but it also reminds me that the world can be unpredictable. We just have to be ready, and we have to care for each other and for those who need help." Their thoughts turned naturally to Mia. She was now safely with the authorities, being cared for by people trained to help children in need. Jack felt a mix of relief and quiet concern. He hoped she would be able to feel safe again, to trust the world even after experiencing such fear. Emily's gentle presence and Jack's calm guidance had helped her through the immediate danger, but he knew the emotional journey would take longer. Jack and Emily decided to spend the morning preparing the ranch, putting things back in order after the chaotic events. They checked the fences, fed the animals, and repaired minor damage caused by storms or daily wear. The routines of the ranch offered a kind of therapy, a chance to focus on tangible tasks while their minds processed the past night. Each action was a reminder that life continued, that the world went on, and that they could make a difference through their careful attention and steady work. As they worked, they reflected on what had happened. Jack thought about the fear he had felt when Emily first cried out, and the sense of responsibility that had settled on his shoulders. He realized how important patience and calmness were, how trust could be fragile, and how vital it was to respond with care and empathy. Emily shared similar thoughts, speaking softly as they worked side by side. "I never realized how much presence matters," she said. "Just being calm, just being there, it can make all the difference for someone who's scared." Jack nodded. "Exactly. Actions, calmness, and understanding, they can change someone's experience completely." Later, they decided to write down what had happened, recording the events of the night in a detailed journal. Not for anyone else to read, but for themselves, as a way to process the experience and remember the lessons it had taught them. They wrote about the fear, the uncertainty, the small moments of courage, and the way Mia had gradually begun to trust them. Writing allowed them to reflect, to organize their thoughts, and to solidify the sense of responsibility they carried. By mid-morning, the sun was higher in the sky, shining warmly over the ranch. Jack and Emily paused their work and stood together, looking out over the rolling fields. There was a sense of accomplishment and quiet pride in their hearts. They had faced an unexpected challenge and had handled it with patience, care, and courage. It was a reminder that even ordinary lives could contain extraordinary moments, and that those moments could shape the people involved in lasting ways. Jack spoke first, breaking the silence. "I think the most important thing we did was stay calm. Fear is contagious, but so is calmness. If we had panicked, Mia would have been even more frightened." Emily nodded. "And kindness matters," she added. Every small action, offering water, speaking softly, holding her hand, helped her feel safe. "We can't control everything in life, but we can choose how we respond." They spent the afternoon preparing a special space in the cabin for visitors or anyone who might need care in the future. They cleaned, organized, and arranged the space with blankets, books, and small comforts. things that could offer warmth and reassurance in difficult moments. It was their way of creating a lasting reminder that the ranch was not only a place of work, but also a place of care, safety, and compassion. As the day turned to evening, the sky painted itself in soft pinks and oranges. The animals settled for the night, the fields grew quiet, and the wind whispered gently through the trees. Jack and Emily sat together on the porch once again, watching the sunset. They felt a deep sense of calm, a sense of having survived and grown stronger through the events of the past days. The fear, tension, and uncertainty had given way to reflection, understanding, and quiet joy in their shared experience. Jack spoke thoughtfully. "We'll never forget this night. It changed us. It reminded us of what's important: patience, courage, and compassion." Emily smiled softly. "Yes, and it reminded me that even when life surprises us, we can face it if we stay calm and help each other. We made a difference, Jack." "That matters," he nodded, feeling the weight of those words. It was true. They had helped someone in need, and in doing so, they had grown stronger themselves. Later that evening, as darkness settled over the ranch once more, Jack and Emily prepared for bed. The stars were bright in the clear night sky, each one twinkling as if celebrating the peace that had returned. They sat quietly for a few moments, taking in the beauty and the stillness, feeling a sense of completion and understanding. The events of the past nights had been frightening, but they had also been profound, teaching lessons about life, trust, and human connection. Before sleep, Jack reflected one last time on the child, Mia. He hoped that she would always remember the warmth, care, and safety she had experienced, even in the midst of fear. He knew that the memory of that night would stay with her, as it would stay with him and Emily. But he also knew that it was a memory of courage, kindness, and protection, a memory that could give her strength in the days to come. Emily leaned back in her chair, looking out at the quiet ranch. "We did something good," she said softly. "Even in fear, we acted with care." "That's something to hold on to," Jack agreed, smiling faintly. "Yes, and now we continue. Life on the ranch goes on. The animals, the land, the routines, they remind us that every day brings a chance to do good, to protect, and to care." As they finally went inside, closing the cabin door against the cool night air, there was a sense of calm completion. The ranch was quiet, the stars bright, and the night serene. Jack and Emily settled into bed, their minds at peace, their hearts full of quiet reflection and understanding. The events of the past nights had tested them, frightened them, and changed them. But they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to each other and to the world around them. And as sleep took them, the ranch seemed to settle too, a silent witness to the courage, patience, and compassion that had shaped the past days. Life would continue, as it always did, with its challenges and surprises, but the lessons of the night, trust, calmness, and kindness, would remain, guiding Jack, Emily, and everyone who crossed their path. The story of that night, of the fear, the courage, and the care, would never be forgotten. It would become part of the ranch, part of their lives, and a quiet reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope, kindness, and courage could light the way. And so the ranch, the cabin, and the wide, quiet fields returned to their steady rhythm. But the hearts of those who had faced the night remained changed forever, carrying with them the knowledge that true courage is found not just in facing danger, but in offering care, patience, and trust when it is needed most.